Welcome to the Inner Space Project podcast, where we explore the full spectrum of emotions, from joy and love to sadness and fear, taking you on an inner space journey that challenges societal norms, encourages open dialogue, and raises awareness about all the parts of us, including the ones that may seem dark and mysterious. I'm your host, Dr. Patti Ashley, psychotherapist, author, TEDx speaker, and clinical trainer. Thank you for joining me as we navigate the labyrinth of emotions, dismantle stigma, and pave the way for a more compassionate and connected world. Do you ever... Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Patti Ashley, and welcome to this episode of the Inner Space Project podcast. This is a special episode because it is the last episode of season 1. And those of you who've been following the podcast know that I divide the segments into beginnings, middles, endings, and liminal space. And the beginnings is the beginning of life, first 18 years. Middles is everything that happens in the middle of our lives, and endings is grief, transition, and loss. Liminal space is those places in between. And I wanted to finish up with liminal space as a space in between season 1 and season 2. And I just wanted to reflect a little bit on how season 1 has been and what season 2 will be, and how I'm in this place in between. So I want to give a big shout out to my CU interns, Natalia and Isabella, who helped me put this podcast together in January of 2024. We started planning and we launched the first episode in May. And we've had, will this be episode 17, I believe, between now and then. And I've interviewed guests in, again, those 3 areas, and we rotate through those topics related to beginnings, middles, endings, and liminal space. And I really couldn't have done this without Natalia, who did an impeccable job of setting the whole thing up for me and getting it on all your podcast platforms and doing the back end work for me. And Isabella doing the graphic design. And of course, a shout out to my accompanist guitar player, Julian Peterson, who did the music for the intro outro for the podcast, which is actually a song that Julian and I wrote together called Good Night Ladybug. And it is a song I wrote after my beloved Lawrence Freedom died of a sudden heart attack. And we had a thing about ladybugs. So I seem to get messages, speaking of liminal space, messages from him after he passed through dreams, through psychic mediums, just nudges. You know how when we lose someone, I feel like they stay with us somehow in our hearts, and their essence continues to give us messages. And so Lawrence was such a dear love to me. And so I wrote this song called Good Night Ladybug. And I hope in season 2, speaking of liminal space, in season 2, we'll get Julian on to talk about that. And I'm hoping that Julian and I will record the song and you can hear the whole song. So be sure to listen to the guitar in the intro outro of the podcast and know that it is coming straight from my heart to you, as does this Inner Space Project podcast. You know, I had this idea, and many of you know, we'll come full circle around to, if you listen to the first one, how when Jeff Bezos went to outer space and raised $5.5 billion for that trip, he took, a group of people up there, one of them being William Shatner, who reflected on the trip saying, it was really depressing for him because he realized that we don't focus really enough on planet Earth. And his book, Boldly Go, speaks to that. And I kept thinking, well, what if we hypothetically could raise $5.5 billion to explore inner space, those parts of us that are dark and mysterious that are inside, because that's where the magic really happens. I'm not opposed to outer space, and I think it's great. I mean, I remember when they landed on the moon when I was a little girl and I wanted to be an astronaut, and then my father died a few years later, and I didn't want to be an astronaut anymore. But what I wanted to be was in heaven with him, and I wanted to understand what was heaven. And I knew I couldn't suicide because I was told in the Catholic Church that you go to hell, and I knew my dad wasn't in hell because he was a pretty cool man. So I knew he was in heaven. Of course, that's what everybody told me. So my work became really exploring spirituality, psychology, depth psychology, grief, what's really happening inside of us. So in a sense, I did become an astronaut, or maybe would that be called an intronaut? I have to figure out what that word is called when we explore inner space. And so these are the things that I'm going to be working on this summer, getting ready for season 2, which will launch in September. And I have a couple guests already that I've interviewed, a couple of them around the beginning section, and one is is coming out with her new book. She's a psychologist, Robin Kaklowski, if I'm saying her name right, has her book coming out. And then I have Amber Chamberlain, who works with new mamas in Maryland area. And then I just interviewed Kelly Sullivan Walden, whose new book, Dreamifesting, is coming out in the fall. And so she'll be talking about that incredible book. And, it's interesting. I don't have any endings lined up yet, but I have a few people in mind for who I might ask. I know a dear friend of mine wrote a book called Feeling Left Behind when her husband died, and we might have her on the show, Kim Murdoch, and a few other people I'm thinking about. But again, we'll continue to rotate between beginnings, middles, endings, and liminal space. And this episode, again, this liminal space episode, is really just to talk about this in between place, season 1, season 2. And so in season 1, it was so exciting. The guest we had in all of those areas, Deanne Davies, who started an amazing program, infant mental health program in Arizona. Christy Sears, Christy Sears Thompson, who's a counselor here in Colorado, working with couples. And then Ted Wired, who runs Golden Willow Retreat Center in Taos, New Mexico, which is a incredible place for people to go when they're experiencing grief and loss. Those are my first 3 guests. And then it just continued to rotate through with amazing people. So if you haven't listened, go back to the beginning and listen again. One thing I do want to say, though, is this is a grassroots movement that comes fully from my heart. And when I asked Natalia if she could do this for me as a unpaid CU intern, and she graciously and enthusiastically agreed and was a wholehearted yes, I felt like something that I had been dreaming about was beginning to take form. Because again, when Bezos went to outer space and raised all that money to explore outer space, and I thought, boy, wow, all the places we could go inside ourselves if we had the resources for that. And really, that's what it comes down to, is resources, right? And because my life has been, up until this point, really minimal resources, financial resources, but tremendous resources from my heart, tremendous heart that I have in my motivation and my work. And especially now more than ever in the political climate and the world we're living in with so many challenges, I feel like it's absolutely essential that we begin to explore our inner space. And so what I really wanted to do, again, from my heart, was provide opportunities for people to really go in And I have a course on my website called Go In, Not Out. And so to go in, and what does that mean? And how do we do that? And who's our guide? Who are the people who's the captain of our inner space ship? And I want to be that for you. I want to help guide you into inner space. And of course, that's what I do as a therapist. And yet, what I've learned in my work is there's so much more that we can be talking about and bringing awareness to and shining the light on. As Carl Jung says, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but rather by making the darkness conscious. And, that's scary for a lot of people. It's just like outer space is scary for a lot of people. So the Inner Space Project is really all about that. And the podcast is only one piece of what I would like to happen here in the Inner Space Project, because I want to do, coming in the fall, wanting to do Substack, YouTube videos, and also in-person discussion groups, and have people get together and talk about different topics. So all of that is forming. And again, where are the financial resources for that? I have none. I'm just going to say that. Thank goodness I had Natalia and Isabella working for me as unpaid interns. And since that time, since they've graduated, I've had a few other interns that have worked for, very small amount of hours and small amount of money, because that's all I have in my budget. So I want to raise money and raise funds and figure out a way to do that. So I'm just shouting out to those of you who have any support guidance for me and how to do that. I know membership sites. I know that, there's lots of ways to raise money, YouTube videos and that sort of thing, but I need a larger following. So I need more subscribers. So please subscribe to the podcast, subscribe to my YouTube page. Shout out if you know of any philanthropists out there, if you know of any other ways to raise resources so we can grow this project, because I really feel like it's crucial in this time when we're living in, when we don't really understand what's happening inside ourselves. I just came across a new article in the Scientific American about the parenting practices in Nazi Germany, and how the way children were raised was to be submissive, and parents were taught not to meet their needs, the opposite of what we know about attachment now. And what we know about attachment is that children need to be held and loved and cared for. But in Nazi Germany, and prior to that, I've also studied Alice Miller's work, For Your Own Good, where she looks at the 18th century child rearing practices of spare the rod, spoil the child, not giving children attention, breaking the will of the child before they're old enough to remember. All those things trickled into Nazi Germany, where, it was really about raising children to be submissive to the dominant power figure in their life, and to willingly do what they're told to do. And that's how Nazi Germany happened. So if we're thinking about the time we're living in now, and this era of an imbalance of power, think about that one. And I'm going to leave it at that. But I feel like it's because if we don't look inside and understand what's happening in our emotional selves, and the shadow, as Carl Jung called it, the parts of ourselves that remain hidden because we fear that they are bad, and the shadow act can cause us to act out in ways we don't understand. And so shedding some light on that, taking a flashlight in and let's take a look, and let's not be so afraid of it, which is what the Inner Space Project is all about. So stay tuned. Hopefully by the fall, we'll have a new outline of offerings that are part of the Inner Space Project, in addition to the podcast. If I can pull that off, I'm going to do my best, because I think it is so important. And I'm also, again, shout out, please subscribe, share with your friends. I'm not making any money on this. I'm spending a lot of time doing it, and I really need the financial resources to pay people to help me do it, to really bring it to a broader audience. So in this liminal space, the place in between, which is where we are, I just want to say thank you for listening. And again, if you haven't listened to the other podcasts, please listen to them and hold on to your hats, because coming in September, we got a whole new round of some new offerings and interviews. And so, that being said, I just want to say thank you for listening. Thank you for being a part of the Inner Space Project. And I'm looking forward to season 2. And yeah, like another one of my favorite quotes is a Rumi quote: "Don't be satisfied with stories, how things have gone for others. Unfold your own myth." And that's what we're doing here. We're writing a whole new story. All right. Take care, my friends. Like, subscribe, and share. Welcome to the Inner Space Project Podcast, where we explore the full spectrum of emotions, from joy and love to sadness and fear, taking you on an inner space journey that challenges societal norms, encourages open dialogue, and raises awareness about all the parts of us, including the ones that may seem dark and mysterious. I'm your host, Dr. Patti Ashley, psychotherapist, author, TEDx speaker, and clinical trainer. Thank you for joining me as we navigate the labyrinth of emotions, dismantle stigma, and pave the way for a more compassionate and connected world. Do you ever Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this inner space journey, and we'll come back again for the upcoming episodes. For more information about the Inner Space Project and all the other offerings I have for you, please visit my website, www.pattiashley.com, PATTIASHLEY. Thanks again, and I'll see you real soon.